So you have, I think what's important for people to recognize, particularly with you, is that your commitment, your consciousness, your capacity for advocacy, for doing the work, is by no means a recent phenomenon. You were engaged in this work when you were in college.
Well, let me say, you engage in the work in various ways. And this is a conversation that I was having just recently today. And I've had on several occasions with people about how instrumental the moment my parents were in my life. As a parents, yeah. But I saw my parents as young parents embracing the civil rights movement here in San Francisco. My mother had from the deep South, my father from the Midwest. They meet in New York. He's in the Army. And I think the first date that they went on was to hear Adam Clayton Powell Jr. speak. In I would say either late 1943 or early 94, excuse me, 1943 or early 1944. And that's where their first date was. So they went there. So my parents were a bridge in some sense. As you see in the war, the war certainly is going to end. My parents were, my dad was shipped or stationed in LA first after he married my mother in New York. And then he went from LA to San Francisco. My dad from the Midwest, Kansas City, he's a jazz man. He come out of that music. He hadn't even had the rhythm. My dad had the rhythm. He didn't know he played, it was a musician, he was the rhythm of a jazz musician, you know what? And so it was beautiful.
And they modeled that for you. And they modeled what activism and courage and involvement meant for you.
And they set the example. They were involved, they came to the post office, U.S. Post Office, where so many African Americans came to after the war. You know, you can go to almost any city. You can go in this audience and ask how many of your mama, your grandparents, whatever, they worked at the post office. You know what I'm saying? There you go, right there. Any audience, I don't care if it's 10 people or whether it's 100 people, they'll tell you that. My parents were part of that. So in the sense, if you say 1948 is what is happening in that particular moment. What you have is beginning the translation of this movement. You have the end of a war. The world has changed. The world is torn asunder by that. All these things are happening around the world, but the same kind of intensity of movement was building in the United States. It had come through all the way to the 21st century. Ever since the emancipation,
it was a world spirit,
continuous against Jim Crow. So you have cases in 1948 to try to break that separate but equal, Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, to try to break that. The cases in South Carolina. That wasn't the first case. Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas wasn't the first case. There were other cases were testing the ground for that. Then boom, Brown versus Board of Education. So you figure my grandparents who have been married in 45, they had been married 9 years by 1954.
It was a world spirit.
So I got a chance as a 9-year-old kid to watch the Montgomery bus boycott, to watch the pictures, the live pictures, not photographs, not reading about it later on. I said, watch it right there. I'm watching it on live. That's the beautiful thing about TV at that time. TV was a new invention when I was 9 years old. It ain't been in existence that long, man. So here's coming into my living room, all these people who look like, and you say, who are these people? And in some sense, you make the connection, even when you're 9, I want to be like these people. Thank you. I want to be like, you know, when you say something, because my mother's celebrating them, my father's celebrating them, and you say, God, you watch these people. You know, then when I got my paper out when I was 13, and then I had some other people who were not too much older than me. They were part of CORE. They were part of SNCC. They were the Freedom Riders. They were the counters in Greensboro, North Carolina. They said, boy, okay, man, how 18? I'm 15, 13.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to change gears. Because I think, you know, we're knee deep kind of in your biography, which makes me want to ask you, when did the acting bug bite you?
When I came, the acting is too. The first time is that we brought a Mary out there, and Mary, we did 5 plays. We did Ed Bullen's How Do You Do? We did Jimmy Garrett's We Own the Night. We did Baraka's, God, what's that one Baraka did? Then we did Ben Caldwell's The Job, and Ben Caldwell was the first militant preacher. That's what we did. You know, what was that? God, I can't think of Mary's place. We did that. And so Mary walks to the office one time, BSU office, and, you know, I'd never been on stage in my life. I'm 20 years old. I'd never been on stage in my life. People would say, you know, Barry's about this tall, man. I want some of you so-called revolutionaries to come and be in the play. If I'm lying, I'm flying. And so what I'm saying, I ain't never been on what you call them. I thought it was my revolutionary duty to be in the play. In the play. And I got in there and started bumbling and fumbling with the lines in the audition. And a sister named Desi Wood, who was a teacher and everything else, and a director. She said, that's all right. You the only one who showed up to audition, showed you up. Because I didn't come. I went to the least glamorous play. Yeah. Papa's Daughter. What's so glamorous about Papa's Daughter? About me playing a father of a teenage girl who's becoming radicalized. You know what I'm saying?
But you know what's interesting about that?
I'm on a sense, in all the kind of simplicity of it, and the genuine authenticity of that moment. That's what I'm saying. That through art, people thought we were achieving something and moving forward through art. Black art was about that. Yeah, that was that. It was that thing more than anything else that was impressive. So you felt that you were doing something valuable, important,
through
just
art.
to be in the play. Yeah, just being in the art. Yeah. That's the only reason why I did that.
Well, that's rich. That's rich.
And you know, it's like the only reason we did that. Yeah. Then okay, so all of a sudden we had a BSU Central Committee. I'm the Minister of Culture now because I did a play, one play. So I'm organizing all the cultural activities for the BSU. And when you said this is a time in life, in my age, you kind of laugh at all this stuff in a sense and see how the progression of things, you know. Yeah. But it's through movement. I'm not an active in no movements.
But I guess the thing that sticks out to me with that narrative is that before hearing that story, I would have thought that the acting bug had bit you much earlier in life.
Never at all. You ask my mother, why every time we had, you know, at church we had a big Easter, Christmas singing, the choir singing, Easter, Easter, I'm sitting with a palm in my hand like this. And my mother, how come you all never have a line or something like that? I'm saying to my mom, we don't want a line. you made us get up here and do this.
I don't want to say nothing.
I didn't want to say nothing. I'm just saying with the palm. I'm happy.
So we're gonna talk about the film festival in a minute. But I gotta ask you. So how did your big moment happen?
Well, what happened is, I tell you, the movement. If I'm not a part of the African Liberation Movement, if I hadn't read my first writings of Mandela in 1967, my first writings, that's who I knew was Mandela. If I hadn't been a part of all those movements, if I hadn't read Julius Nyerere, the teacher, you know, we hadn't read Frantz Fanon, you know, perhaps in some sense, if I hadn't done all that stuff, I wouldn't have been close to being an actor. Because I had not read Stanislavski, you know, I didn't read that now on the craft of acting and everything else. I read that in the Black Arts Movement. So we were doing something. The first militant preacher was about the first militant preacher and it's really simple, you know. How do you do? All those things gave you a sense that you were doing something of value that brought about the conversation. So my first intentions, my first responsibility, and my first avenue in acting was feeling that I'd do something important. And I can't say that. And I can say that the young man in the audience right here is the star of, I think, a very important movie called Hero. Right here. You understand where art and history, in some sense, you can use as a platform to say, this is what happened. You know, these are the voices, you know. They're voices that you never thought had appeared in relationship to the political circumstances, but they were all connected in a sense.
Because it's all ultimately connected. Yeah. So let me ask you this: when you and Babu and whoever else was involved in creating this film festival, the Pan-African Film Festival, What were your intentions when you guys gave birth to it and gave it to the world?
Well, two things I had, and Clyde Taylor, a great friend of mine, it really taught at Howard. It's really a force in thinking about African films. I mean, in 74, 75 in San Francisco, Clyde was there, and he had an African film festival. I'm not even an actor there. I'm looking at the films of Jibril, I'm looking at the films of Suleiman Sisi, I'm looking at the films of Usman Sembene, and all the kind of all the films that circulated at that time, Kwa Hassan, all these from Ghana, and so I'm looking at all these films and everything as part of an African film festival. You know, Paul Robeson told Harry Belafonte, get them to sing their song and you're going to want to know who they are. Get them to sing their songs, and you're going to know who these people are. You hear music. You have Olantunji. You know, Drums of Passion, 1966. Olantunji drums. You're going to know who these people are. That you realize that it's you, but in that sense, get them to sing their song, and they're going to know you. Get them to tell your story. So when I saw Black Girl at the film festival, the beginning of this age of African cinema, post-liberation cinema, you know, Black Girls, Usman Sembene. And I saw all of it, Jibril's great film, short. He only made one film and a few short films, but one of the great minds in terms of that. So you have a kind of what I'm saying, cognitive approach to whatever, what you're thinking. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing something else. So you find, as eventually in life, through Jahid, Babu and I hooked up on a number of things. When I was down here in early 75, just beginning 76, beginning to think I was going to perhaps become an actor and everything else. And you have the theater community around here and the various theater communities. All those were the kind of things, instruments.
Then it was Fugard's.
For me, for acting, everything began and solidified itself as an actor with Fugard's work. After all, Fugard's was the great South African playwright. So that's the way it begins with it. And so now you're centralizing African films in a different way. But we're not the only one that do that. Sidney Poitier, Ozzie Davis, Harry Belafonte, they were our predecessors. They're the ones who set the stage, you know. Robeson and everything. They all were the ones who set the stage before.
But just to give the audience some context, what year did y'all start the film festival?
We started the film festival in 1992.
92, okay.
This is 28th.
20th year.
We began the film festival. We had been traveling around. We've gone to Burkina Faso, FESPACO, which is the oldest film festival. We had been informed by what was happening there. We began to talk to filmmakers, in a sense, and began to collect it. And this is a process, because Babu, of course, with his kind of wonderful and very broad range, man, had brought filmmakers together all began. So we wanted to find some sort of way in which we could centralize that. And I think the fact that we've been nurtured on African films and certainly and films from other regions, the Caribbean, some from other places in the diaspora right here, I think it was something that the idea itself was something inevitable. But after you have an idea, you have to be someone who executes the idea.
Execute the idea. That's facts, as the kids say.
You know, Asajua, Olantunji, Babu, Ayuko Babu, and all the group of people we bring together began to kind of build the idea. And then place it in the context of being the most important Blacks film festival in the country here.
Wow, well, congratulations, because that's a major work.
The most important right here. So you begin to broaden that. So you talk about that you move from that vantage point, in that sense. So, but in a sense, that so many people came to the table. I can't name them. So many people came. Glenn Thurman, part of it.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there are people that to say, oh, the Danny Glover and Babu may have been the co-founders of it, but it was a collective. And then more than anybody else, the audience.
Yeah.
The people who come year in and year in, year in
It's a
and year
community.
out, year in and year out, and know that they're going to have something special at this time of the year.
Would you do me a favor for the people who have not heard of the film festival or just hearing about it for the first time? Can you just say a word about its significance and importance? Why is it important that we support it, go to it, and be a part of it?
Well, that's where it gets that's how you validate it. Your presence there, audiences who come there and support it, and know that this is different. This whatever those 2 weeks are, in which the film are vital and different than any other 2 weeks in the year in LA.